And before we start, we'll just bring up the karakia timatanga. Please feel free to join in. Whakatake te hau ki te uru, whakatake te hau ki te tonga, kia mā kina kina ki uta, kia mā tara tara ki tai, e hia ki ana, te atakura, he tio, he hoka, he hauhu, ti hei, mauri ora. Kia ora everybody and welcome to the new committee. I've received no apologies and there's no public comment today. So do any members have any conflicts to declare? No? If not, we'll go into the first item. Number 5 is the Homeless Strategy Implementation Review Update. So I invite Richard Hardy, Head of Policy and Strategy, to speak to the item. No mai, haere mai. And also we've got Linda Ryan. I'll invite Linda, Adriana Vailima and Oscar Upperton if you're here. Haere ki mua, no mai, haere mai, Linda. I'll hand it over to you, Richard.
Kia ora koutou. Thank you, Councillor Brown and councillors for having us here for this particular paper. I would just like to acknowledge the attendance of Linda, Adriana and Laura. They represent the 3 providers who are helping deliver the homeless strategy, and they're here because it's an important part of the review that we get a window into how everything has been implemented and where the opportunities are. So the purpose of today is to provide you with an update on the homelessness strategy, the review of that particular piece of work and how it's been implemented. And part of this involves the funding of the 3 providers to implement the strategy. In terms of how we're going to implement the review, we've taken a really holistic and engaged approach to how we want to get feedback. It's important that this takes a 360 view, not just a council lens into what we're trying to achieve here, but actually also that we hear from the providers and the providers have an opportunity to help shape the feedback that comes back to us. We want to hear what's worked, we want to see what hasn't worked, but also we want to evaluate what we can do and what we can change within the strategy to actually make it even more successful. From a personal perspective, as you know, I've been at council, well, since November, so heaps of experience. But the homelessness strategy was one of the first pieces of work that I engaged with when I came here. And having come out of central government and seen many strategies and things, it was really refreshing and truly exciting to see a collective approach to addressing an issue that is so important as homelessness and helping us as council understand what actually contributes to homelessness. One thing you will note is that we've established a panel to help us oversee the review process, and that will really help us inform the feedback that we're able to provide back to you once the review is done. So that's enough from me. What I'd like to do is hand over to Linda and Adriana and Laura to just provide a bit more context for you about why this review is timely and what we're hoping to achieve.
Kia ora tātou. Thank you for having us today. We'll introduce ourselves first and then we'll tell you exactly what each of our services are doing. Kia ora tātou, ko Linda Ryan tōku ingoa, he kaima he hau me Takari Mai Te Ata Whānau Water Collective, otherwise known as Kokiri Marae Seaview. I manage the homelessness prevention services for Takari Mai Te Ata, mental health, addiction and Petone budgeting service. Thank you.
Tēnā tātou, ko Laura Liveni Andrew tōku ingoa, he roia ahau kei te whareture hapori. Kia ora, thank you for seeing us today. My name's Laura Drew and I'm a lawyer at Community Law Wellington in Hutt Valley.
Hi everyone, I'm Adriana and I work for Tuatahi. I'm the housing manager in the areas of sustainable tenancies, Hutt City Council, contract and transitional housing. Thank you for having us.
Cool. So we provide a wraparound approach to homelessness prevention in the Hutt Valley, and this was council's wisdom in the first place. So we provide areas of transitional housing, supported living in that space. Community law provide their wisdom to our whānau who are struggling with landlords and other issues in housing. and we support our whānau to seek or find or stay in permanent housing, be it social or private rental. The work we're doing is groundbreaking. It's based on partnership and relationship with yourselves as well as with us, and we've had a lot of successes. Initially, the proposal was that we would be doing from a homelessness prevention space, energy housing in a space that was quick and responsive, and we would work with the whānau for 3 months. What we found very quickly was that the crisis was bigger than we thought, and many whānau are struggling out there, and that's been exacerbated via COVID and other things that are going on with high costs of living. But the contracts enable us to work with the whānau for an extended length of time. Often we are supporting them out of dodgy housing into emergency housing and then back into really secure housing, or working with them to stay in their current private rental situation. And we're really proud of the work we do, but we could not do it isolated. Working with our colleagues here and with yourselves has enabled us to do that piece. Your turn.
Kia ora. So community law work in a slightly different space. We're dealing with legal issues, so people come to us directly or through our partner organisations, and we will advise them to the extent that they need at that time. One of the biggest issues that we're seeing is compliance with landlords, and the law unfortunately does not provide a whole lot of assistance in that area. We have been talking about ways that possibly council could help us with your inspection powers to offer those to people out in the community who are aware that the houses that they're living in are not a sufficiently high standard to be able to support them in bringing a case against their landlord in the tenancy tribunal.
Yeah, so the work we do is really vital, and everyone should know that housing is a small part of the issue, and it's habits that we have to work with constantly to get people into homes. And so working collaboratively works better than working alone, and that's what this kind of mahi does for the whānaus out in our community.
Ka pai. So what we've been able to do is collectively provide budgeting services, mental health addiction services, and all the wider services, takari mai te ata, to our colleagues here at the table. We can get whānau from a point of crisis, and working with them longer term, we can get them to a point of thriving and then do the next bit. And we've been able to successfully house and keep people in houses over the last year or so in about 90 situations, and are still working with another 89 active whānau currently. Overall, we've done 266 whānau have come through our books, and since the contract started, and having some great successes that way. Anything else?
Thank you. So just to wrap it all up, the approach we've taken, as you'll see in the review, is to get an independent reviewer appointed to undertake this, so that we're getting a truly independent perspective on how we're going, and to then, as I said, feedback and be able to update the strategy to reflect what we're actually seeing on the street. We're also on the streets. We're also working closely with our connected communities partners here at council, which is really important, and that's also strengthening the relationship with other parts of council as well. That's it.
Thank you, Koto. Members, do you have any questions? Naomi. Councillor Shaw.
Kia ora, everybody. Thanks for coming along to talk to us. Where is the biggest, you said there's a big crisis, where is the biggest issue or problem? Is it with renting or finding social housing?
What we're seeing at the moment, there's a bit of a theme with the RTA changes. 90 days notice is a thing, and landlords are evicting many long-term tenants who are paying low rents, and they can't afford private rental in the current market. So they're sitting in a situation where we have to try and secure them social housing, and there's not enough social housing. The exciting thing is there's some coming in soon, but because of the systems that we've got available, i.e. MSD and Kāinga Order, selecting the whānau to go into these homes, they don't have the relationships with them that we do. Having NGOs having the capacity to make those referrals is preferred, but not available at the moment.
And just an add-on to that, so does a tenancy agreement not offer renters some level of protection, or is that what part of your role is?
The protections in the RTA are limited, and it is reliant on tenants themselves holding landlords to account. They're often in vulnerable situations where, even though their home might not be up to standard and they're well aware of that, they fear losing that and becoming homeless.
Naomi, often an approach of ours is we'll get them into another private rental and then go back through tenancy tribunal retrospectively. But the power imbalance is really in the landlord's favour still.
Thank you. Councillor Barrett.
Kia ora. So I've got two questions really. One is there any area of the city that's more in need than other areas? And second is when a person has to be taken out of their home, maybe for maintenance or something like that, is it easy? Do you have a list of places that you can get them into? Or is it like trying to find a needle in a haystack? And if that's the case, where do they go in between?
What we've seen post-COVID is our low-income communities are even more dire, and now our middle-income communities, we've got pockets within those where we're seeing the struggle. So it's everywhere is the short answer. In terms of having a nice little list of houses, wouldn't that be good? It's relationships that we've developed collectively and strategically with all the providers out there in the community, government and social, to enable a back door and a coffee, and let's try and get these people into houses. Maintenance on homes, there's a lot of confusion in the community, particularly in the space at the moment in our social housing space. Kai and Ora are doing a great job of maintaining and redeveloping their homes. Many people don't understand what's happening. So you need services like our own, particularly Laura, I would suspect in the space, to explain that information to the whānau so they feel that they're more empowered and they know what's happening to them.
Any other questions, members? So we'll move to the recommendations. I move that the committee from 1 through to 3 is receives and notes the report, notes the proposed approach to the review of the current action plan for implementing the homeless strategy, and notes council's achievements, progress, timeline and next steps for the review. Do I have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Tupou. Is there any member that would like to speak to the motion? Deputy Mayor Lewis.
I just want to thank you for coming in and presenting. We have been wondering, you know, it's been a while since we've heard from the board, from the panel, the work that you're doing, and it was timely. It's up to, you know, ready to go now. So we are all eager to see, you know, the results of the panel and how much more we can do to work and help the situation in our city. Yeah, the reporting that you've fed back today is wonderful, so thank you.
Councillor Barrett.
Kia ora. And I just want to, you know, to go on from that. I want to thank you for the report, but I did hear what you had to say before, and there's a lot of fear out there in the community, and it's fear of not understanding. So it's really important that the work you're doing, and Laura, thank you for being the feet on the ground to explain to people. Because, I mean, you know, I was just explaining to Deputy Mayor before that it was only last week where I was sitting with a lady down on Petone Foreshore who said to me, do you realise how many people we have got living in cars on Petone Foreshore? And it's not just 1 or 2 people, it's families. So it's a very real threat out there and a very real fear that, you know, I mean, we could take a zillion years to get this right, but we don't have that time. So thank you for what you're doing.
Councillor Shaw.
Yeah, I'd also like to commend you on your work. When I first started on council, I had no idea that homelessness was such a big issue in the Hutt. and I love the work that you're doing. So the input into the terms of reference for the review is, and the deliverables, a really, really big step for us moving towards addressing what it is and still is a really big problem. So thank you for your work.
Any others? No? Oh, Councillor Tupou.
Thank you, Chair. Just to thank you again, but also to really reaffirm, the vision that, or the statement that homelessness should be rare, brief and non-reoccurring in Te Awa Kairangi. And I just hope that there can be, Chair, more sort of synergy or some acceptance of advice from MSD and other agencies from you guys on the ground. Kia ora.
Thank you. And I'll just add, I really look forward to the report when it comes through. Homelessness, as we've all talked, is a collective response. It takes partnership. There's no one group that can manage that on their own. So I look forward to that. I also look forward to what our role is that we can play further in council and housing supply, in the community coordination, and particularly in the Residential Tenancy Act. You've highlighted that the changes have made, but nobody is complying to who's doing the compliance and enforcement, and I look forward to seeing whose role that is. So I'll put the motion forward. All those in favour say aye. All those against? I declare the motion carried. Thank you. So, moving along. In accordance with Standing Orders 10.4, as a chair, I'm moving item 10, Fraser Park Sportsville, while we've got the guest here for the annual report back to council. So if you'd like to come forward, Colin and Liz Lepro, no mai haere mai. And I'll ask Andrea Blackshaw, Director of Neighbourhoods and Communities, to speak to the item. Welcome to the table.
Kia ora tātou, thank you, Chair. So Fraser Park Sports will have a partnership with Council around the operation of the Rico Sports Centre at Fraser Park, and we provide an operating grant annually, and as part of the requirement for the operating grant, the board come back and report to us annually. So this is their annual report back. The annual report for Fraser Park Sportsville is yet to be published. So the financial results that are in the paper are interim. And we have today with us the chair of the board, Colin Stone, and also the general manager, Liz Lepro, to answer any questions that anyone has.
Thank you. Members, any questions? No questions? Councillor Shaw.
It's noted that since the inception, really, this agreement, that COVID has been in play, hasn't it, right from the very start, and it's had quite a big impact on the use of the facility. Now, from my own observations, I'm there quite often, and the park use is really huge, actually, at times. One of the biggest issues we've got at the moment is we can't get a car park there, but that's another story. But do you foresee the facility, once we get away from this COVID problem, being able to cope with even bigger numbers?
Kia ora, by the way, call Colin Stone, Toko Ingoa. I'm the chair of Fraser Park Sportsville, as you heard. Look, from our point of view, we don't think the facility has yet reached its potential. Since we've been open, and council will be, or the committee will be aware of this, we have yet to have a full trading year. So we've been interrupted by predominantly COVID, but other interventions that have got in the way. So this is the first year, fingers crossed, that we are basically tracking towards what could be nearer our potential. I guess one of the comments I would make would be that while we believe the organisation is more stable now, we certainly see the opportunity to really partner with council in a proactive way rather than a reactive way as being the next stage of the development of Fraser Park. So I'm kind of answering your question, Councillor, in a long-winded way, but basically it's saying the whole of Fraser Park is a gem, not just Ricoh Sports Centre. So how do we leverage off all those parts to really impact the community in the most proactive and productive way that we can?
And Colin and Liz, we are in question time, but I'm just going to wind back one step and invite you both if you'd like to add anything to the report that we've got in front of us.
Yeah, so obviously we've tabled the annual report, which was for June last year, which seems a little bit out of date now, and the supplementary report. So what it shows really is that we are holding our own, but it is relatively tough going. Like every other organisation of our type, we are facing increasing costs, particularly around power, gas, staffing costs, cleaning costs, increases in rent that will be coming our way as well. So we would urge council, while we have a 3-year agreement around grant funding, which is on a sliding scale backwards, we would ask council, please remember that we actually cannot survive without that ongoing financial support. At the moment, without that council support for this year, we would be running at a 100k loss. At the moment, we're running at an 18k profit, albeit that we budgeted for to be at 40k profit at this time of the year. So, please don't wean us off the financial support you're giving us. Is absolutely fundamental to our viability and to take the next stage forward of being a proactive partner of council.
Thank you, Colin. Deputy Mayor Lewis.
Thank you. Nice to see you both. It's going to the infrastructure report there, the work that was completed in November 2022 on the sewage system. Was that in the new building or was it further away? What happened there? I wasn't aware of it, sorry.
Oh, okay. No, that was within the facility. So we had a massive sewage problem which flooded inside. So we have extensive damage inside, and luckily the facilities team at council, Lance, and supported us big time, but we lost a lot of gear. And then following on from that, the facility was closed because we couldn't provide the toilets. It was a nightmare, and we've had ongoing work for months. It's now 90% completed, Lance. So we're just having work done at the moment. Our concern is as we grow, so this problem with the sewage, a lot of it was maybe pipes aren't big enough to take the volume, and we're only growing and growing, and our concern is moving forward as we grow, is that whole drainage and everything on the park going to cope with the increase in numbers. So whilst a lot of work has been done on that, we still do have issues.
Any other questions? Councillor Parkin.
Just regarding the depreciation which you pulled out in the report being a significant part of the operating loss, what's the predicted depreciation for the next year? How far through that curve are you?
I can't answer that off the top of my head. Sorry, I'd have to come back to you with a response.
Yeah, we're not at that yet.
Any other questions? I move that the committee notes and receives the Fraser Park Sportsville report attached as attachment 1 to the report. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Barrett, thank you. Is there any member that wishes to speak to the motion? Councillor Shaw.
I consider the Fraser Park Ricoh Centre Sportsville model to be one of the jewels in the crown of the Hutt City Council facilities. And I just want to thank you both for your knowledge and experience that you bring to the roles. Colin, with yourself being with Sport New Zealand, are able to bring to the board stuff that is really helpful to make sure that this place continues to thrive. And Liz, for the work that you do going above and beyond to continue to make the facility a fabulous place to be at. It really is. So thank you both.
Thank you, Councillor Shaw. Any other questions? I'll put the motion. All in favour say aye. All those against say no. I declare the motion carried. Thank you, Colin, and thank you, Liz.
Thank you.
Ka kite. So moving on to item number 6, neighbourhoods and communities focus area, council's approach to working with neighbourhoods on page 28. I'll ask Mal, Head of Connected Communities, to come forward, and Hiria. And Andrea as well will speak to the item.
So this is a strategic paper and no decision is required, but the purpose is to inform you about the way we are rolling out this new approach to working with neighbourhoods and communities, and to share with you some of the information that we are collecting and collating as we do this so that it can inform your decision making as well. So I'll hand over to Mel Laban, who is the Head of Connected Communities, and also Hiria Davies is with her.
Kia ora. First, I'd just like to introduce, well, I'll get Hiria to introduce herself. So she's our new neighbourhood manager. So she looks after this program of work whilst also picking up a neighbourhood of her own. So.
Kia ora koutou, ko panikere, ko maunga pūhatu ngā maunga, ko waikare tāhe ki te awa, ko waikare moana te roto, ko mātātua, ko takitimu ngā waka, ko te kuha, tā rewa, ngā marae, ko tūhoi, ko Ngāti Manua, ko Ngāti Kahununu ki Wairoa, oku iwi, ko Owen Rawa, ko Waitangi Davies, oku matua. Ko Hiria Davies tōku ingoa, nō reira, tēnā koutou, tēnā tātou katoa. Kia ora.
Kia ora, Hiria.
So I'll take the report as read. As you'll see from the report, we've provided an update on the role of the neighbourhood facilitator and how they'll work in our neighbourhoods to harness that collective impact. We've also provided some information on Wainuiomata, which was our first community, and that was largely because the first recruitment in terms of our staff was given Wainuiomata. You'll also see some data has been included in that from our policy team that hopefully you will find useful in some of your future decision making. I know Jared and the team are looking at how we might make some of this data much more accessible to our community, and that's a piece of work that team's working on. You'll also see we've provided a diagram in terms of how we want to be leading that approach in terms of community development. I'm happy to take any questions. Also, sorry, before I take any questions, Marcia Skinnan, who was with Wainuiomata, just so you know, she has resigned. So at the moment, we've got quite a big portfolio, and we've got Hiria and Shannon, who some of you have already met. So we're just going through some recruitment as well. Kia ora.
Any questions, members? Councillor Shaw.
Thanks for the report. I really enjoy reading this really good things that are happening in our community. And I enjoyed the insights on Wainuiomata. I thought it threw up some really good data to make some good decisions on. So will similar be completed by ward, or will it be by suburb? For example, Stokes Valley and Taita are quite different demographics. So will it be Northern Ward insights or separation out?
At this stage, it's by neighbourhoods, not so much by wards. And this piece, pulling this piece together itself was quite a huge piece of work for our policy team. So I think they might have committed maybe another 2 or 3 to complete for us this year, and we'll just kind of keep growing those. But you can be rest assured, I'm fairly sure Taita and Stokes Valley are part of the ones because we have a facilitator in those neighbourhoods as well.
Any other questions? Deputy Mayor Lewis.
Thank you, and nice to see you both. That was my line of questioning, was around that data, which I found interesting, but it is how we can then go and use it. So having it early, and it was a big job, I just heard, but if we wait, I'm thinking if we go through all the hubs and wait for that data to come, it's going to be a while, and it would be really helpful to have it earlier if possible for the whole city, done in the connected neighbours, the neighbourhood groups in advance of work. So, you know, the people that are working in the communities already have it in advance of connected communities coming in. Is that possible?
That's probably a question that we'd need to ask of the policy team. Currently on their work program, they've got the capacity to do 3 this year, and it would be a question of whether they were able to prioritise that work.
I can answer that through you, Chair. Putting together the profiles like this for the research and evaluation team is a significant undertaking. So often what the way of operating at the moment is that the team does have capacity to pull together specific, data and insights requests as it's needed for particular pieces of work, but that is not to the same extent as these particular profiles. So there's to be very frank, a resourcing constraint there, and we think we can deliver 2 or 3 in the financial year, but we wouldn't be in a position to deliver more than that.
Thank you. And just following on from that, the data that's been shown now for Wainui Mata, how do you envisage it being used in the future?
Very good question, Councillor Lewis. I think we will, as we go through the community development model and the diagram, I think a lot of that stuff will come up and will be discussions in community to work with community around, so what is the data telling us as a neighbourhood? So I think there's part of that there as well. And for us, it's just understanding what does it, because again, we, like with everyone, we've got the data, so now we need to be working with our policy team. And also the data tells us part of the story, but we also need the insights that are not necessarily the data, but what are our community telling us, and just making sure that we're aligning everything up. But I would expect to start seeing over time, as the work program rolls out, more community-led initiatives getting started and underway that we might help facilitate that actually addressing some of these issues, some of the data.
So just to add from that as well, one of the conversations we're having that connects to this is around democratising the data. So there's a piece of this which is around making sure it's used for council decision making, and it's obviously key to a community-led development approach. But also part of the consideration we're having from a insights perspective is how do we make this available back to the community as well? So it's not council's information, it's not our insights, they're insights for community that can be used to drive community projects, or for people to actually, for example, use to inform funding bids or whatever it might be. It actually can be given back to them and they can use it for whatever their needs are.
It's a really good conversation, thank you. It's just getting more of where it's going here, and that community-led initiatives, it's what areas does it cover? Are you hoping that every area will be different? How do you see, what sort of projects would come under that?
Well, I think the way that we're moving as a council is around community development. So actually enabling our community and supporting them to deliver more and coming up with their own solutions. And so right now, we've got facilitators. We're kind of trying to look after Wainui. We've got Hedi looking after Wainui, and we've got a couple of others. And I think as we start building those, we'll start seeing more of the community-led. I think if you look at the data, we could probably in this room come up with some really great initiatives like that. Problem is it sits with us. And this is where the community-led stuff comes in, is it's going to take a little bit longer, but we actually want to sustain and enable our people to be driving some of these solutions, which again, there is no quick fix to it, but that's the commitment that we want to make in terms of that long-term sustainable change and impact.
Thank you. Any other questions? Councillor Tupou.
Thank you, Chair. And just relevant to Deputy Mayor Lewis's questions, to Mel is, would there be an opportunity to cross-pollinate? One of the previous reports was on housing, and things like almost, a third of the homes in Wainui are damp. Things like 14% of our residents live in overcrowded conditions. So having read the report, I think there's an opportunity where you meet, is it on a quarterly basis or something, with the other teams across the business. And so would there be opportunities where you cross-pollinate some of this data across? And we also, you can retrieve some of those lived experiences from the housing side.
100% is the answer, Councillor Tupou, and I think it's not only this, it's a whole lot of data that my team's also sitting, all the council's sitting on. So the whole purpose of those quarterly hui is that we are all cross-pollinating as a council. Yeah, I will be over the homelessness stuff and the housing stuff.
More questions? Councillor Shaw.
Yeah, I was just thinking, I've already said that some really good stuff going on. How do we as elected members engage or get involved? If I want to have a conversation with my community, do I hook up with our facilitator? Do they drive the conversation and we join in, or is it the other way around? How do we get involved?
So the role of the facilitator is to connect everybody, including councillors. And so, yes, the facilitators will have an approach that they're taking in a neighbourhood, and they will be looking for all stakeholders in that neighbourhood. And if there's a ward councillor who wants to be part of that, they would be part of that, connecting and harnessing the collective impact of everybody.
Thank you. We'll move on to the recommendations. I move that the committee receives and notes the report. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Briggs. Does anybody wish to speak to the motion? I'll put the motion. All in favour say aye. All those against? I declare the motion carried. Thank you, Marlon Hedia. So moving along to Reserves Investment Strategy Update on page 62. I'll ask Kelly Crandall, Head of Parks and Reserves, to speak to the item. Kia ora, Kelly.
I'll take the paper as read. The Reserves Investment Strategy is really a paper providing an update on the purpose of the strategy and when we expect to see pieces of that work rolling out. So the Reserves Purchase and Development Fund that Council manages is funded primarily by income collected from subdivision. Proceeds from any land sales of reserves also go into that fund. And the fund has typically been used to cover the cost of developing amenities that are related to growth, or it helps with the cost of developing amenities or purchasing land related to growth. The annual plan typically would have a number of projects in it that would be identified as having funding from this source. We've nearly exhausted the projects that are in the annual plan now, and we're looking to identify some new ones, and we're taking an opportunity to have a look at the criteria that guide us when we make recommendations about which projects might be covered from that fund, and we will be presenting that criteria back to the committee, and we'll be also identifying some individual projects for the long-term plan. So the long-term plan's more than 12 months away. So we are proposing for the 23-24 annual plan 6 projects that are listed in the report, 6 projects that would be funded from that fund where we believe there's, it's quite easy to make an argument that those projects are required and have a strong connection to growth, and the growth would justify expenditure from that fund. So we've picked 6 projects where we believe that if we had the criteria, these projects are so closely aligned that they would definitely be ones that we would be recommending for funding. So that's a little bit of a holding pattern to get through until the long-term plan, and we expect to see some much more significant list based on good criteria, which will come out of consultation for the long-term plan.
Members, do you have a question? Councillor Briggs and then Councillor Parkin.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Kelly, for the report. On those 6 projects noted in the report, they're all fantastic. And my kind of question and kind of concerns around the doability. You know, do we have the capacity in the organisation as well as with our contract partners to actually get this done in the time that we're aiming to in the next 12 months?
Through the Chair, we have factored in doability, and we believe that we've got, except for the specimen tree project, we have factored in the the idea of having these projects being externally project managed. So we would fall back on that option if we couldn't resource it from our own team. And we believe that certainly some of these projects will fall to an external project manager. And we don't really have contract partners in mind for these projects. The bulk of them would go out for some sort of competitive pricing process, tendering or quotes.
Councillor Parkin, then Councillor Shaw, then Councillor Lewis.
Kia ora. So yesterday we had one of the members of the public come and speak under public comment around spongy cities, but also resilience and utilising, it was actually debris from earthquakes and tsunami type situations to generate systems that can actually trap emergency events and stop them becoming worse. I'm just looking at this in terms of the Delaney Park and just wondering if that's something you've considered in terms of the spongy cities, especially within light of climate change and the floods that we've been seeing up north.
Through the chair, we haven't specifically considered these projects against the kind of spongy city concept, but it does seem pretty obvious that we would be going to, I mean, the parks industry doesn't need the Auckland events to tell us that permeable surfaces are absolutely critical and that parks have a big role to play for providing permeable surfaces. So the quantity of sealing that we introduce will be a concern, as it is with most of the projects that we look at and we have for a long time. So it would certainly be, we'd be cognizant that concept of spongy cities.
Follow-up question, Councillor Parkin.
A follow-up question on that with paved surfaces. Have we looked at permeable paved surfaces within part of our plans? So permeable concrete, etc.
Through the chair, we have not and we will be. And other products too, yeah.
Councillor Shaw.
Thank you for the report, Kelly. It reads really well. And I'm really pleased to see that some of the money, or all these projects are really great, but in particular High Street Pomari, because there's so much housing intensification going on up there. And I think they'll be really happy to see something happening in their space. Question I have is about how do we apply a reserve fund for spaces and amenities to those regions where there's very little space available, you know, for especially where housing intensification has occurred?
I'm off the top of my head, I can't think of a geographic example, but my first response really is it's probably about enhancing what we already have in that area. That would probably be the initial response. So make what we've got better so it can work harder, it can provide for more people, it's more appealing, it has a higher capacity to deliver. The second option that I believe would be looked at is acquiring additional land, which is tricky because you would look at it and go, well, that flies in the face of doing what we can to maximise housing supply. If we purchase land for reserve purposes, that's land that then can't be put into residential housing. So it would be case by case, area by area.
Deputy Mayor Lewis.
Thank you. It's really good to see all these parks getting a bit of investment put into them. And I'm just hearing from the conversation, Councillor Parkin's point about putting in, you know, water-sensitive urban design into parks. Do we have a policy over our parks where there is, like, I'm thinking Bell Park is a swamp, like it was a swamp, prone to flooding that area? Will we be putting in, water-sensitive, spongy city type?
Through the chair, that's quite a hard question. I think that we would be applying the modern principles of landscape design and reserve design to way that these open spaces might change, and that would include consideration for really responsible use of water, reuse of water, and provision of permeable surfaces. So not all the sites that we manage have that potential, but some of them, like Hutt Park, that has already been realised because it is an overflow flood facility, as well as being a sports ground. So some of that thinking has happened in the past, and that's probably 10 or 15 years old now, but there's more could happen.
No, you're so right. And following on the same paper, the specimen tree planting citywide, there is extra funding available. You know that I think there's a fund in reserve, Lavelle Bequest Tree Fund. So, and talking to that, in the urban forest plan, I believe every community was to be sort of talked to about where trees go and the value of trees in their community. So I just wondered if that was going
Does this relate to the reserves, Deputy Mayor?
Yeah.
Okay.
Through the chair, that Lavelle Tree Fund is something that the finance team have encouraged us to attend to. That isn't the 30,000, so potentially we should be talking about the 30,000 and dealing to that fund. Yes. So the urban forest plan is the document that talks about a tree plan, and I believe it's specifically for street trees, which is managed by the roading team. But I can pass that on to the roading team for you.
Any other questions? Councillor Tupou.
Thank you, Chair. If my questions are relevant, happy to be redirected by you, Chair. But just to Kelly, it's relevant because it notes emphatically that that the fund is project funding can't be used for things like ongoing maintenance, upkeep, and so forth. And it's made me think that a couple of residents have commented on, parks and reserves haven't been mowed as often as in previous years. And looking at this agenda, that might irk a few people out there. So does that mean that we are lacking in operational, that sort of OPEX side of things in terms of maintenance, mowing, that side, is that?
Through the chair, with respect, I think that perhaps that's a little bit separate from this program, which is really about capital investment.
Yes.
Otherwise, we start getting into a discussion that's a bit like buying the groceries with the mortgage money.
Yes. Thank you, Chair.
And Andrea, would you like to make a comment?
I was just going to add that, these questions, great to hear them all, and they're all really helpful. And I think this is the exact reason that we're doing a strategy with this significant amount of money, because it is a significant opportunity. And we think that we need a piece of work that looks at a lot of the things that we've mentioned today, that looks at things like how do we balance the needs of neighbourhoods where there's been growth, but they also, how do we keep pace with the demand for housing? How do we bring in spongy city technology and thinking when, really it's in the past couple of months, the need for that has been heightened. How do we respond to that? And also the one around maintenance. We are currently having other conversations around the cost of maintaining our reserves and looking for savings in those areas. So how do we make sure that we don't create a whole new group of assets that are going to put pressure on other budgets? So I think for all of the things that have been mentioned here today, it's exactly the reason we think we need a strategy to look at the big challenges and trends, and to then find the right balance in what we suggest going forward that's taken all of those kinds of things into account. So those questions are really helpful towards that.
Thank you. If there's no more questions, I'm going to get Kate, if you could put the recommendations up. They're quite a long list. So move that the committee supports 1 through to 3. Do I need to read them out? Okay. Councillor Briggs? Oh, you're seconding. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Briggs. Does any member wish to speak to the motion? Okay. There's no one? Okay, I'll put the motion. All in favour say aye. All those against say no. I declare the motion carried. Thank you, Kelly. Okay. Item number 8, drainage rights over reserve land for 90A Rata Street. Agenda number, page 69. Nicole from Parks Planner to speak to the item. Over to you, Nicole.
Yeah, Tina Koto, ko Nicole Toko Ingla, Parks Planner for Parks and Reserves. So this report is fairly straightforward in terms of drainage rights. We have consulted with the engineer, surveyor, legal team, and the water team as well on this. In essence, it is we are seeking approval to grant private stormwater connection rights under Section 461 of the Local Government Act over reserved land, which is in Butler Street Reserve, which is designated local purpose reserve. This dwelling is subdividing. They're adding just one more dwelling onto their property, and this would allow connection over the reserve into the mains of the reserve. So right now they have exhausted all other options to drain stormwater onto the curb or other options. They've really extensively looked into this. And so we have decided with the engineer that the best route is to allow this connection. The pipe is only going to be about 100 millimeters, which is actually the preferred pipe sizing to drain stormwater onto reserve land. To also mitigate further stormwater, they will have a 5,000 liter stormwater tank, detention tank. So this will also help mitigate any sort of risks. And flooding and other water ponding is already considered less to minor effects. Thank you.
Members, any questions? Councillor Briggs.
Thank you for the report. Just a question around precedence, and does this put us in a position where more people subdividing may see this as an alternative approach for them, or the approach that may be more cost effective, or something that would make them utilise more of their land for development for housing? So does that put us in a position in the future where this becomes more common, or where it becomes more challenging to decline based on precedence?
Thank you. So through the chair, we have absolutely thought about this. This is actually, it has grown increasingly common. I actually have about 5 or 6 requests about this. I'm relatively new in this position, but historically I understand these are quite frequent requests, and they are increasing with the intensification. For precedent, our stance that we make clear is that we really do not prefer going on to reserve land. That is our stance. We only will accept if all other options have been exhausted. So we will always consult with an engineer, surveyor, and oftentimes Bruce Hodgins with Wellington Water for their support and advice. Otherwise, we will not allow connection if we truly think it is going to impact the environment, or we will find other solutions such as armoring, making the pipe smaller, adding detention tanks, or in one instance, even creating maybe possibly a wetland or something that matter. Thank you.
The practical alternative for a landowner that does wish to proceed with the subdivision and they weren't able to drain into the main downhill onto the reserve would be pumping the stormwater up to the street, which is not a great idea from a reliability point of view. But there are pumps that do manage stormwater around the city, but it's the ability to drain naturally downhill into an existing main is practical.
Deputy Mayor Lewis.
Thank you. I know we're just considering this one today. I haven't looked over all what else is around this address. Is there potential for other properties to do the same thing?
Yep. So through the chair, potential only, like I said, if completely exhausted, we are working with these our process our resource consents team and our planning teams, along with the consultants and developers, to find best options. One mitigation is to nip this in the bud right in the beginning of the application stage. So instead of waiting until the resource consent is issued and then asking for permission, we are actually working to have them have this addressed in the pre-application stage. And so they can directly ask us, and so we can work out a solution. Thank you.
Have you had much success with that? Is that going to happen?
Yes, actually, we are quickly moving forward with this. I've been having really good talks with developers, and it actually has increased very good relations between council, the developer, and the applicant.
Thank you.
Okay, any more questions? Councillor Parkin.
Thank you. You mentioned the stormwater detention tank is already in there. You also, in your briefing, mentioned the fact that there are other options in terms of wetlands, and one other thing I didn't hear you mention was catching the water for actual use for potentially a grey water type system or rainwater system, which would act as a buffer before it enters the stormwater. Have any of those options actually been discussed with these people?
Yeah, so through the chair, personally, I haven't come across it yet, just because this is actually my first council meeting giving a drainage report, but I'm sure it will come up. I'm also a conservation biologist, so I do have some focus in this area. So I am working, of course, to see the most environmentally friendly options. I don't know if Kelly might have experience in
the Parks and Reserves team would typically not be involved in the services side of a subdivision. We're normally looking at it from an open space perspective, which is how we've been looped in here because they want to use the reserve next door. So it would be really something for the planning team to consider and possibly something for the district plan review.
Thank you. If there's no more questions, is that a follow-up question?
So I think I know the answer to this just from your answer already, but I'm gathering that we would not be able to issue a directive to the developers that we would prefer that they also, in addition to the proposals, put in some passive use of water before it gets to the stormwater as part of the permission.
Was that something that was just mentioned would go and be a discussion at the district plan? Not here?
I don't know the answer to that.
Through you, Chair.
I think we would need to take some advice from the planning team, the consent planners on that. I'm just not confident about answering it.
Okay,
sorry.
we'll get advice, but I'm got someone from the committee saying it's district plan, but okay. Okay, we'll move to the recommendations. I'm going to get them put up on the screen again. The 3 recommendations. I'll move items 1 to 3. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Barrett. Is there any member that wishes to speak to the motion? Deputy Mayor Lewis.
Thank you. Yeah, we have seen more of these reports come through for drainage and onto public space. So I think it is something in the future that council looks at and does spongy city processes in that park where they're draining to, and that perhaps is something district plan can talk about, having that on the resident who wants to do it. So they have to contribute something perhaps towards wet spongy city in the park instead of just offloading water. So it is a district plan thing, discussion, I believe, but that's my thinking.
Any others? I'll put the motion. All in favour say aye. All those against say no. I carry the motion. I declare the motion carried. Thank you, Nicole and Kelly. So next up, Neighbourhoods and Communities Director's Report on page 73. So I'm going to ask Andrea Blackshaw to speak to the item.
Thank you, Chair. I'll just draw your attention to a couple of things here, but take most of the report as read. Really in the highlights section, you'll see we've given some examples of areas where the strategic shifts that we are trying to make are becoming visible. So it's really nice to be able to report on those, and in particular our partnership with Mangaraki School around having a shared school community library, which is a really great example of partnership and community-led development. I was also going to just draw your attention to this, what's on, which is on your tables today, just hot off the presses. You'll see too that this is actually starting to reflect some of the strategic shifts we've talked about as well, in terms of being a bicultural organisation and community, as well as a multicultural one, and having one aligned and coordinated program of activity to support wellbeing. So a lot of the activities that are in here are expressed under the wellbeing rather than under the teams that they're necessarily delivered by, and also making information on what people can do really accessible to them and easy to make it easy for people to connect. So just a few things that are starting to show these shifts that we're making, which are good to see. So happy to take any questions.
Questions, members? Councillor Lewis.
Thank you. I had one in the service activities and support wellbeing. Is this that same paper? Page 78. Just on that bullet point 31 around the sports and signing is it a contract or something, an understanding, a vision? Which division is that?
The Sport, Rec and Play team within Connected Communities.
Any other questions? Councillor Shaw.
Just got a question on page 85, item number 76, and it states an increase in homeless people presenting at neighbourhood hubs. I was actually at the Kuranui when such an incident occurred. So do we have some sort of safety aspects built into for our staff to be able to cope with some of those issues that they're having to deal with they may not have done in the past?
Yes, we do. We have a number of both physical safety considerations, which our health and safety officer regularly reviews, but also the staff go through training around how to de-escalate situations. So there are protocols that they follow in terms of safety, when to contact the police, that kind of thing, but also get training in skills about how they might manage a situation themselves. And yes, we've lifted what we're doing in that in response to what we've been seeing.
Sorry, I had another question. Will we see the Colin McCann artwork come out of the cupboard for the Unhinged series? I've heard about this piece and love to see it.
Actually, I'm not sure, but I'll find out and let you know.
Just a question I'll ask as a follow-up to Councillor Shaw's. Do we have, we've got the partners that we work with in homelessness as well as social housing and Urban Plus, do we have a referral system? If people, as mentioned, if people are presenting homeless at the hub, that they refer them to the partners that we have?
Might just ask Mel Laban, who's still with us, to come in and talk to that one.
That connection with Urban Plus, Councillor Brown, was discussed at the the panel the other day, and that's something that's still, it's a work in progress, but at the moment there is no direct referral system from our spaces or even our homelessness partners to Urban Plus.
Thank you. Any other questions? So we'll move to the recommendations. I move that the report be noted and received. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Morgan. Is there anyone that wishes to speak to the motion? Councillor Shaw.
I just want to thank you, Andrea, you and your team. This is a really quality document and I think it's really well put together, so thank you for that. There's a lot of stuff going on, but I think some of the things that touch my heart is the support given to the Taito family who lost their home in a fire, the Stokes Valley Kai Resilience Program where residents are shown how to build a raised vegetable garden plot using pallets and given seedlings to grow kai, the Twilight Basketball at the Walter Nash Stadium where Wellington Basketball provide the sausages, participants bring the music, we provide the venue, and the community turn up in greater numbers each week. So I think that's really great examples of collaboration and caring for our community's wellbeing. So thank you for you and your team.
Any other members? Councillor Parkin.
I'd just like to register my thanks for the work that the team's been doing with Mangaraki Library particularly. That partnership has been wonderful to see how that's panning out. I'm gutted I'm going to miss the opening. I've got something else on that weekend, but I wish you all the best for it and thank you so much for the work.
Mayor Barry.
Actually, just to echo Councillor Parkin's comments around the library outcome, I think that's just a fantastic example of, you know, being approached by the community and generating a really good outcome. We know that we hear from our Western Hills community that they do have limited facilities there, I think naturally due to sort of the topography and the connection with the rest of the city. But getting these types of outcomes is fantastic for that local community, and I know that there's been quite a bit of interest even from other councils and local government New Zealand of how this will work and how it potentially could be duplicated in other communities where, you know, we have ultimately stress with our budgets and limited funding and looking to make the most of the assets that often our schools hold. So great stuff by the team, and I suspect one that a lot of people much wider will be keeping an eye on.
Thank you. Any others? Councillor Tupou.
Thank you, Chair. Just to say that sort of thanks to all the teams on the ground at the coalface, and that we don't have to wait for an emergency or resilient situation to start building resilient communities in our community hubs, partnering with our schools, etc. So I just want to thank everyone involved.
Thank you. I'll put forward the motion. All those in favour say aye. All those against say no. I declare the motion carried. Thank you, Andrea. So, finally, 9 projects, 10B, on agenda page 99, a progress update from Andrew Quinn, Project Manager. Thank you, Andrew, and thank you for waiting.
Tēnā koe, Madam Chair, Mr Mayor, tēnā koutou, and to all councillors too. This is the progress update that covers August 2022 up until today. Actually, it's progress up until the end of January. And I've summarised some of the key milestones we've been able to achieve in that intervening period. We've now lodged all of our consents. In brief update, 65% are now approved for construction. That's movement in the last couple of weeks. So we're really moving on with our legislative compliance documentation. We're well underway with foundation slabs, and we're actually working on 75% of the floor area. So the dry changing rooms and the reception area will be the next area of focus for us. Off-site procurement, design activity and building consent processing is proceeding in line with the program that we agreed with CIP, and that's really important when they're providing a large portion of the funding for this project. Procurement of major components for the building are progressing to plan, and local suppliers are involved in the tendering process. And again, that's really important for our social procurement outcomes. Design activity for the refurbishment of the old Nainai post office to turn that into a community centre is complete. Building consent has been granted, and we recently led a contract with Duncan Commercial Construction, who also operate in the Hutt Valley. The cost of Nainai Pool and Fitness Centre continues to be reviewed at regular intervals and remains within the 68 million budget cap. Nothing else to note really from the report, although I have noticed a couple of errors which I'm happy to pick up, but it refers to the appendices, not quite the same as the text. Apologies for that. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you for that detail, Andrew. Any questions? Mayor Barry.
Thank you for the report. Just with the budget, and I know that obviously with these types of projects, the more we do and the more we advance, the less the risk becomes around budget costs increasing and escalations. I suppose in your view, is there any major milestones coming up, and when are those major sort of milestones that eliminate, you know, or lower that risk of cost escalations?
Tēnā koe, and through the chair, Absolutely. Most of those progress milestones relate to the ones that we've pre-agreed with CIP. But actually, when you look at the risk in the marketplace right now, it's all about how many of our subcontractors have we brought on board, and we're close to now 100% of work being committed. So that means that the contract that we signed with Apollo Projects has now been committed to the majority of all the subcontract packages, and therein lies the cost risk for Apollo, and that's what we recognise to be some of the pinch points behind then moving forward into the rest of the construction. So our risk profile will change now that they've committed all of their subcontract packages and the price variations become apparent. I guess the next major milestone for us is having the structural frame up. I think we can see good progress now with the superstructure, and you can start to get a comparison of how big the facility actually is. But once we put the roof on and start work on the pool water services, once the pool tank come from the supplier and we start doing that install, we'll be through some of the major risks that we face. But the largest one right now is committing all of their subcontractor packages, and they're pretty much at that point. So coming out of the ground was the largest risk for us.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you, Andrew. I'll just get these recommendations put up. We'll move to the recommendations. And I'll move that the committee receives the memorandum and notes the following progress that has been made on the 9I projects from A through to F. Do I have a seconder? Deputy Mayor Lewis. Is there anybody that wishes to speak to the motion?
I'd just like to thank Andrew for turning up with a great report, and it's so neat to see the progress on 9I Pool, and thank you for the invitation to go and look around the place.
Any other members? I'll put forward the motion. All those in favour say aye. All those against say no. I declare the motion carried. Thank you, Andrew. So final item, Communities, Culture and Partnerships Committee Forward Program for 2023 on page 106 of the agenda. Does any member have a question regarding the program? Councillor Shaw.
In your report earlier, there was mention about the Greater Wellington Region Spaces and Places Framework and Plan. I'm just wondering if that should be in our forward program. Will it be coming up this year at some stage?
I'm not sure if that's something we're already part of an agreement around that, and I'm not sure if it's something that requires coming back to council, but I'll have a look.
Any other questions? Okay, I'll go to recommendations. I move that the Communities, Culture and Partnerships Committee Forward Program 2023 be received and noted. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Briggs. All those in favour say aye. All those against say no. I declare the motion carried. I've received no questions, so we will move to the karakia whakamutunga. Please feel free to join in. Unuhia, unuhia, unuhia I te uru tapanui, kia wātea, kia mama, te nākau, te tinana, te wairua I te tara takatu. Koia rā I rongo whakarihia ake ki runga, kia wātea, ai rā kua wātea, hau pai mārere. Kia ora everybody and thank you.
Congratulations, Chair. Very good meeting.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor.